even a shred of documented proof that these people are the original people from the Holy Land is crazy. There's way more proof to the contrary, which they've stopped printing, even their own textbooks, which they've stopped printing, that point to the fact that they came from Turkey, the Turkic Ashkenaz tribe, It at least makes me happy to hear you acknowledge that there's a demon. It's the strangest thing to me when these people are treating Bibi Netanyahu like he is their Christ. And that is what makes it a disgusting heresy, right? Like it's to misinterpret the Bible so much that you're basically platforming and honoring what Bibi Netanyahu does, avoiding the topic, not acknowledging that what he's doing to the Palestinians is wrong. Having love for Jerusalem, that makes sense. Having love to be able to walk in Jerusalem and to see the relics, that all makes sense to me. And I think I'm just more disgusted by people who turn a blind eye to everything that's happened to the Palestinians. It just makes me sick. And to see him on camera acting like such a gangster and people pretending that he's holy, where there's even a shred of documented proof that these people are the original people from the Holy Land is crazy. There's way more proof to the contrary, which they've stopped printing, even their own textbooks, which they've stopped printing, that point to the fact that they came from Turkey, the Turkic Ashkenaz tribe, that came down, began speaking Yiddish, and then needed a place to go after World War II. It's crazy to me. The whole thing's crazy. Again, I would debate anybody on that topic. Definitely feeling especially fired up about it.
I just had a rabbi give me an analogy. He said, look, imagine you left your home and then someone came and occupied it, and then you try to get it back, and then they went to the judge. Have you heard some of these analogies? Maybe you can.
Yeah, that's assuming that, that's taking it to a place which I don't usually go. That's making the assumption that today's Jews are really the descendants of the ancient Hebrews that used to live in that part of the world some 3,000 years ago.
I want to talk to you about the Holocaust, and please allow me to be offensive, as I've been learning a lot about the Holocaust and why it is such a precious area where you are not allowed. There's no incursion. You can't ask a question. You can't even, if I said, you know what, I think it was 5 million, forget it. I mean, it is very precious and protected. And as I've sort of began reading more books, I do have a theory, and you may be offended by this theory, you can push back on it. But particularly, I felt even more confirmed in this theory. Are you familiar with Nicholas Gruner?
No.
Okay, so Nicholas Gruner was an actual Auschwitz camp survivor. He was on the march, same march as your parents were on.
My father.
Yeah, your father was on, and he wrote a book in Yiddish about his experiences. And there was his friend who was with him on this walk, who he wanted to reunite, wrote this book in Yiddish. And when he found out that his friend had wrote this book and it had been translated into English, he went to go meet him, right? And it was like, I'm going to be reunited with somebody that was in this camp with me. He gets up to shaking this person's hand, and he's like, you've taken on the identity. This you're not the real survivor. That person whose hand he shook was Eli Wiesel. You might be familiar with him because he wrote the book Night, and it was proven that he lied about certain parts of it. Nobody knew why, what this was. And so he then spent the rest of his life, Nicholas Gruner, dedicated to telling people that this man was effectively a gypsy who stole the identity of a real person. And he said, Nicholas rolled up his sleeve. He's like, we all have tattoos. He's not going to have one because he's not the real guy. This guy took his identity.
You say, well, where did the name Ashkenazi came from? So a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany. They looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany. So they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken. Okay, it's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false, zero truth to it. Just study the history.
Look, man, I mean, I will as I always think I do, like confess when I don't really know enough about a subject, but I don't know enough to like know this for sure. But I am pretty convinced that everything Netanyahu's saying there is actual. And the fact that it's like, oh, the Jews are genetically the same Jews from the Bible. Like, I don't think anyone can actually demonstrate that.
Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now, I bet you thought it was going to be a lot crazier than that, right? Now, you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel. But according to Israeli law, the fact that I have Jewish blood gives me more right to somebody's home and land in the land of Palestine than somebody that has been there for hundreds of years. Doesn't make sense.
Which is a kind of strange thing, because it kind of seems like if that's your whole claim, then like, wouldn't you be the ones who want to demonstrate this? The truth is that like Sephardic Jews, I know this much, that Sephardic Jews and Arabs have like incredibly similar DNA, and that the European Ashkenazi Jews like me and Rob have distinct differences from them. And so I just don't think, again, I do not know enough to know this for sure, but I just don't think it's at all scientifically demonstrated that like, no, these people are the ones who originally come from that land.
Well, it turns out that Elie Wiesel was a cousin to Robert Maxwell, right? Fascinating, right? Absolutely fascinating. Robert Maxwell wrote about it in his own book, his authorized biography. And we know Robert Maxwell, obviously, who everything about there is to know about him. And I was fascinated by this idea that there were people who were stealing the identity, whether dead or alive, of people who had actually been in the Auschwitz camps, building on their stories in whatever way. And it's sad that nobody knows Nicholas Gruner's name. People should know his name because it was a valiant fight. And he, to the very end, said, there are people who are stealing our identities. And I go, I've got this feeling that happened a lot more than we think it happened. This is one guy, and by the way, Robert Maxwell then purchased a massive stake early on in McGraw Publishing, McGraw-Hill, which means that, and then his wife was traveling around with Elie Wiesel, and this guy was like, this was not prisoner number, whatever it was. He took his identity, and that's a really terrifying thing to think about, that people with power saw, okay, these people were in camps, maybe they perished. We can take their identities, take their stories, whatever it is. He never found out what happened to his friend. He assumes he died sometime after the camp. And he did write, it was his friend who wrote the manuscript in Yiddish, and then Elie Wiesel adopted that. And now we have today, as you determine, a Holocaust industry. I'd like you to describe that, but just what I'm telling you, I mean, isn't that just the most terrifying thing ever?
Kyrie, the documentary listed among falsehoods, it said the Holocaust didn't happen. Do you believe the Holocaust
those falsehoods happened? Are unfortunate. And it's not that I don't believe in the Holocaust. I never said that. Never, ever have said it. It's not come out of my mouth. I never tweeted it. I never liked anything like it. So the Holocaust in itself is an event that means something to a large group of people that suffered something that could have been avoided.
Did Ron Dalton write in his book or stated in his movie that the Holocaust did not exist? Remember, that reporter dealing with Kyrie Irving, he said in the movie, Ronald Dalton said that the Holocaust did not exist.
Kyrie, the documentary listed among falsehoods, it said the Holocaust didn't happen.
And I'm going to prove to you, family, that was actually a complete lie. What did Ron Dalton actually write in his book or say in his movie? Now, this is coming from his book, Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. Let's see what he says inside this book as we fact check it. The Jews have established 5 major falsehoods which work to conceal their nature and protect their status and power, to wit. Number 1, the Jews are Israelites, in other words, Hebrews, and thus God's chosen people. Jesus Christ was a Jew. Jesus did not practice Judaism. Jesus' stock was of Levi, Aaron, in other words, Mary, and it says in of Judah, Joseph. Number 3, that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II. Notice what it says is many sources and scholars have proven that there were less than 250,000 Jews living in Europe at the time of the Nazis' Third Reich rule. This number was fabricated and was believed to be true by Jewish-controlled media in America. Number 4, that all people are not equal in the religion of Judaism. We are considered goyim or goy, just like cattle. Number 5, that the Jews are just another religious group. In other words, the Jews today are Europeans whose ancestors converted from pagan religions to Judaism religion. Being a Jew, which is a follower of Judaism, is basically a religion. The race of anybody practicing Judaism varies by country. Therefore, the Jews are just a religious group, quoted by Ashkenazi Jew Harold Wallace Rosenthal. And this is the source. The hidden tyranny, the issue that dwarfs all other issues, the Rosenthal document. And notice what it says here in the footnotes of this book. The Jews have established 5 major falsehoods. Wait a minute. That is coming directly out of Ron Dalton's book, quoting this source by a Ashkenazi Jew. So what they're telling us, basically in a nutshell, if we quote what they said, then we're anti-Semitic by quoting what someone from their community has said. So Ron Dalton is actually quoting from this book. Number 1, the Jews are Israelites and thus God's chosen people. Number 2, Jesus Christ was a Jew. Number 3, that 6 million Jews were killed in a Holocaust during World War II. So it's saying the number, but didn't say that there was no Holocaust. As the reporter said to Kyrie Irving, it says that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust during World War II, that all races are equal, or that all are brothers, and number 5, that the Jews are just another religious group.
We don't really know each other, and we're having a serious conversation now, and we should try to parse it, just mean analyze it carefully.
Yeah.
So let me give you, as I understand it, the situation, not just from family history, but from having read quite a lot on the subject at a certain point in my life. Having read quite a lot, I would say almost obsessively, because of my family history, and having written on aspects of it. The estimates are there was an extermination campaign by the Nazis. We don't know. 2 main questions remain open. 2 questions remain open. The 2 questions that remain open are when. When did it begin? That still is an ambiguous area. When did this Nazi extermination camp actually begin? Nazi extermination plan. And we still don't know with any kind of certainty why. What was Hitler's exact motive at that point? So the when and the why, they remain gray areas. Now, I have to be, for people who are listening, I have to be careful. I stopped reading about the subject about 20 years ago. So there may be new scholarship which supersedes what I have just said, but that's it. Here are the 2 crucial facts. 1, I don't consider it crucial. The estimates by the best historians are between 5.2 and 5.4 million Jews were killed. It doesn't make much of a difference. Let's say it wasn't, but let's say it was 3 million. That doesn't make it better, obviously. Okay, but the estimates are between 5.2 and 5.4. Now, coming to your question. The Nazi extermination was very efficient. You can use a slur and say it was done with German efficiency. And to some extent, there's a truth to that. You know, what makes a cliche is it's most of the time true. What is a generalization? A generalization is something that's generally true. What's a stereotype? A stereotype is a generalization that you don't like. If you say Jews are smart, Jews like that generalization. If you say something else about Jews, that's a stereotype. But the Germans carried out the Nazi extermination with great efficiency. Why is that important? There were very few survivors. Now, Candace, I'm not trying to, I don't have an axe to grind. I'm just telling you factually. You take my mother. She had 2 sisters and a brother. They were exterminated. She had a mother and father. They were exterminated. My father, I don't know the details, but I know for sure he had 1 sister and 1 brother. These are taboo subjects in my home. Can't talk about them. So I don't know the details. I know they were wiped out. One of the reasons I wasn't bar mitzvahed, I did not have a bar mitzvah. And you know why? I mean, there are many reasons. My parents were resolute atheists. But one of the reasons was there was no one to invite. You see, a bar mitzvah is a big family event. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, and so forth. Of course, the person being bar mitzvah invites his or her friends, or it's his friends. The person being bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. But the big thing, it's a family occasion. There was no one to invite. There was no one to invite because the Nazi extermination was very efficient. So the estimates are, at the end of World War II, the estimates are less than 100,000 Jews survived the Nazi Holocaust. Less than 100,000. So that means, where did all these survivors come from? Everybody claims there was a period when the Holocaust industry was in full, was very lucrative. There was a period where everybody claimed to be a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, they all claimed to be Holocaust survivors. They weren't Holocaust survivors. There was a person who...
I actually think they were, but I fear they were survivors of another Holocaust that was going on at the same time, and they may have been, in part, executing it, which is a question that Alexander Solzhenitsyn writes, which is, where did all the Bolsheviks go? And I think, and this is again a theory, while we're allowed to think, well, this is a good opportunity right now to take on the identity of people who perished and just rewrite history of ourselves as the victims. And when I saw that Nicholas Gruner story, I was like, that's so terrifying, because it's required reading coming up in schools. You have to read the story. There's tons of Holocaust people that we could be reading your books, talking about your parents and what they lived through, and they picked this man. And
I will get to the Elie Wiesel. I know it well. In fact, I'm not trying to promote the book. It came out 25 years ago, but I write a lot about Elie Wiesel in the book, okay? So, I remember my father, we both knew a person who had the tattoo. The only place there were tattoos were Auschwitz.
Auschwitz,
It was the only camp where they had the tattoos. And I said to my father about this person, and my father had the tattoo. I always knew the number. It was like 028128, something like that. I had memorized the number, but now I've forgotten it. I said to my father, I said, do you think he was in Auschwitz? And my father said, no. And my father was not a conspiracy person.
yeah,
No, he just said very matter-of-factly, non-judgmentally. He just said no. And I said to my father, I asked my father, so where did he get the number? And my father said, and I'm quoting him now, he said, well, after the war, some people took it off and some people put it on.
Poland agrees to change Auschwitz tablets. After 50 years of deflecting the request of Jewish groups, the Polish government has agreed to change the wording on stone tablets at Auschwitz and Birkenau, the adjacent Nazi camps where more than 1 million Jews died during World War II. The move follows decades of appeals by Jewish groups who say the current plaques do not fully reflect the suffering of Jews there and focus too heavily on the camp's non-Jewish victims. So they're saying that, according to them, at Auschwitz, that number is highlighting those that were non-Jewish. But notice what they say. While thousands of non-Jews were among the estimated 1.5 million killed at Auschwitz, the victims were predominantly Jewish. This is the original tablet. 4 million people suffered and died here at the hands of the Nazis. Murders between the years 1940 and 1945 said 4 million. But then when we go to the newest or the more up-to-date plaque, it says here, forever let this place be a cry of despair and a warning to humanity, where the Nazis murdered about 1.5 million men, women, and children. But notice the wording here. It says mainly Jews. So even with this 1.5 million, it's saying they were not all from the Jewish community. It goes from 4 million to 1.5 million. So if you take 2.5 million and subtract that from 6 million, that's going to put you down to 3.5 million. That's just at Auschwitz. So according to the anti-Semitic laws, what they're saying is, if you say or give the proof that I just shared, that there was 2.5 million numbers removed from that overall 6 million number, that can be considered an exaggeration.
Learn how to play ball. That's what the Zionists did, except instead of a baseball team, they went to try to convince the Jews that the Jewish people are a nation, like France and like Spain. We'll get a land, that's Israel, that's our stadium. We'll get baseball bats and balls, we'll create a language. They sat down to create a language because nations need languages. You can convert to Judaism, you can't convert to a blood family. You cannot convert to a race. Judaism is a religion, that's all it is. The religion created the Jewish people. The definition of a Jewish person is somebody who is transformed by receiving the Torah.
Who the hell are you anyway, right? I mean, anyway, I don't care where they came from. I don't care about religion. I don't care about any of the gobbledygook, right? But a bunch of Aryan-looking people that comes from Eastern Europe and pretends that God gave them the land 2,000, 3,000 years ago, right? And oh no, we're the real Jews.
But he didn't say it as a joke.
Yeah, he's just
my
like, this
father
is,
was,
the incentive here is to have one.
Yes,
It's bad.
yes.
It's incentives. It's incentive culture, obviously. They talk about this as welfareism. If you're going to incentive bad behavior, people are going to do it.
Yes, I without going into that because I was on tangent, but yes. And my father said very matter-of-factly. So my mother used to get very frustrated because even more so than my father, she could never let go of what happened to her family. She couldn't let go. And there was something that really more than grated on her when people who didn't pass through what she passed through claimed to have passed through it. And she once exclaimed in a kind of bitter irony, she said, if everybody who claims to be a Holocaust survivor actually is one, who did Hitler kill? So everybody's claiming to be a Holocaust survivor. There are very few, a handful survived that ordeal. Now,
especially particularly in Auschwitz, because there's so many were like, well, you said the tattoo.
There were the death camps, and then there were the concentration camp death camps. There were both work camps and Auschwitz and Majdanek. I once spoke to the world's leading authority in the Nazi Holocaust, Raoul Hilberg, who was very kind to me. He was of your political persuasion. He was a right-wing Republican. He swore by the Wall Street Journal. I was at the other end of the spectrum, and I was a total pariah. However, don't ask me why, because I've never really understood it. He kept defending me. I was always very nervous around him. I didn't want to say anything wrong because he was kind of my savior. He was saying that what Finkelstein is writing is true. And when the tenure battle erupted at DePaul University, he gave this very moving defense of me. And he said that I told the truth. It was at a very big price, he said. But he said, in the history of those writing about history, Finkelstein's place is secure. In any event, I once asked him, he lived in Vermont. He taught at the University of Vermont. He was very much his own person, so he could never get a job at a top university. He said very few women survived Majdanek. That's where my mother was. Very few people. So it was worse, actually. The women's section was worse than at Auschwitz. In any event, once the Holocaust industry became an industry, they were very picky about who they promoted. Now, Elie Wiesel was a fanatical supporter of Israel. He was fanatically pro anything that any American government would say. And so he became the spokesperson for the Holocaust. As to his personal history, I'm just going to give you the details as I understand them, okay? He claims he was in Auschwitz. He claimed that he was in Auschwitz. And he describes in the book Night, he describes some scenes which Raoul Hilberg, the person I mentioned to you, from the person who defended me and for reasons which still remain, except integrity, which is so rare. He was the chief historian for the Holocaust Memorial in Washington. Elie Wiesel personally picked him because Wiesel knew his stuff. And he said there were certain scenes that Wiesel describes in Night that occurred at Auschwitz. Hilberg said they could not have happened. They could not
without
have
question,
happened.
they didn't happen.
And
You read Nicholas
so,
Gruner, yeah.
When Wiesel was confronted with Hilberg saying they happened, he doubled down and said they did happen. Wiesel, I knew some, not many, I knew some first-rank Holocaust historians, and they told me he was deported in 1944 from Hungary. That was one of the last deportations from Hungary. And he maybe passed through Auschwitz en route to a labor camp. That may have happened, according to the people I talked to. But there was clearly, I discuss it at some length in that little book. Wiesel figures not in a cameo role, but he has a major, he's a star of the Holocaust industry.
Yeah, I'm glad that I put Nicholas Gruner on your radar because he just knew the guy. He literally stole his identity. I mean, it's a crazy.
I remember,
he knew him because obviously when you're in a camp together, and he was just so excited to re-meet this someone who had this experience with him and described the march, everything, and the soles of his feet, and he just was what he did was the real person wrote the manuscript, and this gypsy just took on his identity and. When he describes that moment of being on the plane, what am I going to say to him? We haven't seen each other. And then could you imagine being confronted and going, wait a second, you're not Norm Finkelstein. You're not Norm. That is, and he said, but he had cameras ready and they shook hands. And then he even said, what's even crazier is the real Holocaust survivor spoke Hungarian.
Well, that is
and Elie couldn't speak Hungarian at this time when this happened. And so he says to him, let's speak in English. It's just an incredible thing to comprehend that. And I think the best that I can guess is that you had these psychopaths, true Bolshevik psychopaths who were well, we can't just walk in and be I was just kind of running the Bolshevik camp over here, mass murdering Christians. So what better way to reintroduce yourself into society than to be I'm the ultimate victim. I survived the Auschwitz camp. I think that's what happened. I think they laundered they laundered through, and that's why there's so much confusion. And people are you're denying that people died here, because there's some people that are well, nothing ever happened, and it's no, something definitely. You read this guy Nicholas Gruner, and you're this happened. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who never lived a day in their lives of that, and I say Elie Wiesel is one of them, who took their personalities, took their identities, full on gypsy.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.